Well, I started in 1980. I was just trying to get some extra money to go travelling. So the idea was that I would stay for about 2 or 3 months, get the money, then off travelling with a friend. And I ended up staying with the council for 9 years. So I didn't go travelling in the end.
I'm a qualified butcher, but I couldn't get enough time off to play football and cricket during the summer and winter. So one of my uncles said, "Oh, come and work on the dust. You finish early enough, you'll get away." And I went there 42 years ago.
Because my dad was a dustman, so I just followed his footsteps, basically.
When I first went on to the thing, unless you knew family, you never got on there. It was like a closed shop.
And obviously it was council then, and that was one of the hardest jobs to get, was to be a bin man. And you had to start at the bottom. You had to start off at road sweeping and work your way up.
I did 4 years at the university in Algeria, but I couldn't get my place, a job. So I've got a poor family to work for, so that's why I came here. When I came here, I never think like to be a road sweeper or, I was coming to work and that's it. After I did choose some jobs, I find them that they are not good for me. It's not good paid. I cannot do my life. So that's why I changed, I chose that sweeping job.
Security guard for about a month. And when I saw my wage packet, I went, no, this is not for me. And basically, I would have taken any job. And they had 2 jobs, and that one nights, one part-time days. And I took the part-time days as a sweeper. And I enjoyed it. Yeah. I started sweeping in the summertime, so the weather was really nice. But when it came to winter, that was a different story. Cold, snow, you used to go out gritting. A couple of times I hid in the cafe for ages, trying to warm up.
The very first day, the first round was called K7, and that was all around Gloucester Road and Queensgate. All around that area, on all the associated streets. It was quite a heavy round. They were all heavy rounds.
In the early days, it was very busy, smelly, and we had metal bins instead of these plastic bins, which was heavy.
And the first day, I remember the first day when I finished and I went home, I sat down on the couch and I thought, oh my God, what have I done? This is going to kill me. And I just stuck at it and I thought, well, you don't make a decision that quick. And then after a couple of weeks, I just got into the swing of it and I thought, yeah, this will be good. And I just carried on.
I was lumped in working, picking up like heavy bags and, just working till about 2 o'clock in the rain. And I remember on that first day, I thought, I'm never going to do it again. My back was hurting, my fingers were hurting, because you're constantly lifting up bags. And I decided at that point there then I wasn't going to do it anymore. So that was my first day.
Well, my first day at work, it was nothing strange because in Jamaica we do hard work, similar. So it was nothing scared to me at the time.
In those days, there wasn't much training, to be honest. It was on-the-job training. You would join the dust. Your supervisor would say, right, this is your team. The team would come and they'd show you how to work the back of the dust cart, give you a few instructions, and off you'd go. You'd just sort of follow the rest of them and they'd kind of tell you how to do it. And that was really it in those days, to be honest.
I was working during my holidays, which were university holidays in the summer, so I was probably covering some of the normal dustmen that were on holiday themselves. So they had a team or a crew, and basically what they wanted to do was to work as a team to get through their round as quickly as possible. Because if they all worked really hard, they could be home by lunchtime. And if you were the weak link, and they tell me that if you're the weak link that slows them down, they weren't going to be too happy about it. So immediately you felt under a little bit of pressure. Now to speed the process up, the dustmen had come up with their own scheme. They'd got these big old-fashioned like 1950s prams with great big wheels. They'd taken out the pram, they'd kind of laid this kind of like fabric bread in the middle of the pram, and they showed me how they did do it. They kind of stacked the dustbin bags in a pyramid. So you'd have like 4 along the middle, and then it's 3. So they had them all stacked up neatly, and it looked easy. But the first couple of places we went to, you started picking it up, and then you realised that you weren't going to just walk along with the pram, you were going to run. They were moving so quickly, these guys, they're super fit. They were collecting these bags, and when they were loading up, they were literally running after the dustbin and on the move all the time. Well, I was a little bit rubbish at it, so I was rubbish with the rubbish, and I couldn't stack them up properly. So as I was coming out of the houses, I was putting them onto my pram and trying to run with them, and they kept falling off one side after the other. Then they'd split over, and there was all these nappies and stuff all over the thing. And because I'm a good boy, I thought I'd better pick it all up. So I'm trying to stuff it back in the bag neatly. And then when I'm looking up, and remember I'm in Gravesend, so I've got no idea where I am, dust cart's gone. And I'm thinking, what do I do? I'm going around with this pram full of dustbin bags, going, have you seen a dust cart?
I was the charge hand, and then the next person, it goes down the line who comes in, he's next in charge, and so on and so on. I used to pick my own crew. So once you pick your crew, you've got them virtually for the rest of your days you work with the company. I find when you pick your own crew, you've got a good mixture of people that can get on. And that's a key, is making sure you've got a nice crew.
Some teams don't get on well. It takes a long time to get a team together that works, that gels, that knows what they're doing, and then they've got to have a certain amount of time, and everybody knows what the other person does and reads the other person.
Especially if you've got a good crew that you're working with, it makes the day go a lot easier, a lot quicker, and it makes the work go a lot smoother as well. You work in a 4-man team. You could either be dusting together, that's what they call it dusting. You could be working like in pairs, or you could be working on your own.
For me, like you said, it was just like a white environment. At the time, there's 3 back guys, and it stayed like that for a long time. And then gradually, you started to see the change.
When I first started on my round, they were all English, and then obviously like a couple of them retired, and now we call ourselves the Foreign Legion, because we've got an Englishman, a Ukraine, a Polish, and a Lithuanian.
To be honest, there were no female collectors that I can recall in the 80s and probably the 90s. In the management team, there was some supervision, so there was some female supervisors, but really you didn't see any female workers. There might be the odd one, but it wasn't something they really did then.
We did have a girl on our round, and she was good. She put a lot of blokes to shame. She was one hell of a worker. Like, when she first started, we used to had the banter with her. Fair play to her. She give it back, because her dad's a driver here anyway, so. But she probably one of the best workers I've ever worked with, to be honest.
When it's true, when I start, a lot of people, they told me, oh no, this is not women's job, you cannot do it. And me, I said, no, I have to try it first, because you can't tell me don't do it, because I have to try it first. If I don't like it, it's definitely I'm going to leave. But when I try it, it was an amazing job for me, to be honest. It's a respectable job, because people, they respect me on street.
Well, they used to be known as clinker bins, and they weighed as heavy as a full bin now with rubbish in. That was just the bin. That's without the coals in them and that, and lifting them up, you throw them on your shoulder. You used to have your mate there with you. You both lift it on your shoulder, and then you sort of crawl up the stairs and then tip it in the back of the lorry. Many a time some of them still had hot ashes in and you set the vehicle alight.
It was dustbins, and when they were empty they weighed 28 pounds, which is roughly 13 kilograms. And they were empty. So by the time you put rubbish in them, they were heavy. And you had to carry one on your shoulder and carry the other one low down by your left or right leg. So it was hard work. It was very hard work.
What would normally happen in Kensington, they were 5-man crews in those days. So you had a driver, you'd have 2 guys who would pull up in front. So what they'd do is they'd go down to the basement, they'd pull the waste up, put it on the pavement in piles, and then the vehicle would come along maybe half an hour afterwards and collect that waste and put it straight into the back of the dust cart.
Well, first of all, when I started, I was a driver loader. So I used to go out with maybe one dustman and fill a dust cart, and I was driving it as well. So secure the vehicle, jump out, get the bins, empty them, take them back, jump in the lorry, drive off to the next.
The main crew that I worked on over the years, and the majority of Kensington Chelsea, is basement orientated. And so you could go downstairs into what used to be the old coal chambers, and you're dealing with multiple occupancies. So you can open up a door and you could be facing 50, 60 bags, in a particular cupboard, and you would have to walk those bags obviously up the stairs, and you would have to prepare it neatly, recycling on one side and the rubbish on the other side, and the crew would come along and we would put it into the back of the dust cart.
The bulk bins, going to schools, shops and factories, people wanted to get on them because there was no lifting. You just pushed the bin onto the back of the lorry, pushed the button and it went into the back. So there was no lifting at all, and they got finished very early because there was only the fact that you had to travel between the bins, between the schools and between the shops. So that was quite a sought after rounds.
Get up just in time, because you're tired, you're always tired. Get to work just on time, get your vehicle keys, check your vehicle over, make sure your crew's in. Some are already out pulling the rubbish up from the basements. Check your trade sheets, because you'd have to go and pick up trade jobs first. And then we would meet up at the first street for that day and just start throwing the rubbish on and catch up with the guys that were pulling it up from the basements. And then by the time we'd got that on, it was a quick tea break. I would go to the tip to tip the lorry. They would then start pulling up the second load, and I would meet them at a designated street for that day and then load that, and then they'd finish and I'd go to the tip, empty the lorry, go back to the depot, hand the keys in and go home.
The perks of the job was coming in, finishing early and going home, so it was like task and finish. In those days, no lorry was on the road virtually after 11 o'clock. So you come in, do your work and you could go home.
I do remember my driver at the time was a cab driver as well, so we used to finish off doing the round and the work and then go out on the cab and earn extra money.
Mister, did you get the brush? Okay.
So the first couple of days I went there, they had me road sweeping, and they were very strict about what you could do. So on one day you had the picker, and on the next day you had the brush. and you weren't allowed to use the brush on the picker day or the picker on the brush day.
For myself, it was a little bit hard because I was on the main roads, and then as a first woman working in the road, I felt that shining. So then after I said to myself, you know, I have to work, and then I start to work. I like it later, and that's it.
I was road sweeping for about maybe 6 months. It was hard going, I must admit, because obviously pushing a broom, you was getting the blisters on your hands. But it's just basically sweeping up like leaves.
Leaf season, you sweep the street and it's nice. And then a few minutes later, you turn around, the leaves have come down again. It looks like you ain't done nothing.
Feel part of the community, of course. I feel a part of the community. If I'm not on the street, even 2 days, sometimes they thinking that I'm busy somewhere because my area is busy. But if I don't go to the area 2 days, people, they start to ask about me.
We took strike action in the late 70s, early 80s, and it's commonly referred to as the winter of discontent. And my view was it was a dispute to get us a halfway decent wage. And when we told residents what we earned, they tended to agree with us. They were quite irate because they weren't getting their bins emptied, but when we spoke to them and told them what our wages were, they said, oh, well, we didn't realise it was that low.
I remember the strikes, City of Westminster in the 70s, big pile of rubbish at Leicester Square. The block of flats where I lived, the rubbish was so high the people on the ground floor couldn't actually see out their window.
After the winter of discontent, the public discontent with the situation that had got out of hand, with lots of waste on the streets for months on end, Margaret Thatcher came along with the idea of privatising public utilities. So what they did with waste collection is that they asked for people to put into tenders to collect the waste. And so today, even though you'd see the livery of Kensington, Chelsea or Westminster side of a dust cart, the organisation of waste is in the hands of private companies. So we have Veolia in Westminster and we have Suez in the Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea.
Well, when I started, it was in the transition period from direct labour organisation or council run to private company.
It was a shock because, like, when it was council, everything was lovely. You finished early. Was made redundant one day and then come in the next day under a new contract. The rounds got bigger and heavier.
Obviously, we was council and being paid by the council, so in theory you could work overtime. You could, and when the privatisation come in, obviously the company have now got to pay for everything, so the money went down. It weren't as free flowing as it was when it was council.
People have thrown the jury away by mistake, and we've had them come out about 10 minutes later asking us where it is, and they've had to go down the tip, and then they've had to search out loud to try and find it.
There's a lot of things get thrown away, memories, a lot of memories get thrown away. I think that's what people really worry about. When somebody passes away and they're discovered in their houses and they have no relatives, and their houses need to be cleared, or somebody comes to clear the stuff and you throw the stuff in the back and the crusher comes down and it opens the bags up and you see all the old photographs of their life. That's quite sad. History getting thrown away. History.
Sometimes the major challenges is the bad weather. The bad weather, because sometimes when you wake up in that morning and that rain pouring down, and when you go out on that ice rain, sometimes when the first bag you take up, you go for, as you lift it, all the water gone on in your boots. Same time at your gloves, sometimes your gloves full of water the whole day. So it's not easy. Your fingers are very, very cold on your feet.
Opening like various cupboard doors and, you know, just finding bags all the way up to the top and having to take those bags out. And sometimes in between those bags you could have mice or rats.
In Kensington, Chelsea, there's lots of basements, and when you go downstairs, there could be like 100 bags, and you alone, virtually sometimes, are carrying those 100 bags up by yourself. So you imagine the street's got like 50 houses in it, and they've got the same amount. It could be a long, hard day.
But they'll always remember what day they're going to block the road where they can't get to work on time, and they'll either try and leave early, or sometimes you get them that just sit there, you know, trying to put pressure on you. And if you give in to that pressure, that's when you can have accidents, because you start rushing around because people putting pressure on you. But, you know, good crew will know that's going to happen and will try and avoid that whenever they can. You can't always avoid it.
You never know what someone puts in their dustbin. And I had one occasion where the back of the lorry caught fire, and that's a chemical reaction. Someone put something in there and another resident put something else, and they interreacted and burst into flames.
Once I was collecting rubbish in All Saints Road, and I'd pressed the hopper, and as the hopper came round, there was a shotgun, sawn-off shotgun, and it had 2 shells in it. One was live and one had been fired. And we saw it and we stopped it just in time. And in them days we didn't have mobile phones. They'd been invented, but nobody really owned one. So we had to go to the phone box, ring up, and then the message that I gave to my supervisor then went to the police. And within 10 minutes the police turned up. But I don't think they got the story right, because they came and surrounded us with guns, thinking that we had the guns. I was going, no. And we had to point to the vehicle, and then they took the shotgun out, made it safe, took a little statement. Yeah, there's all sorts of things that happen. You've got to be on your guard all the time. You don't know what you're picking up.
Because I used to do my job, I know it's a disgusting job, maybe for some people, but for me, I can't do anything. For me, nothing is disgusting. As I choose that job and like it, I have to do everything.
Some of the bins that you pick up, had a split in it, the one that I had anyway, summertime, and picked it up on my back, and all maggots in it, and all going down my back. Yeah, I weren't impressed. Felt sick.
It's like you have to do disgusting things every day. You have to just put up with it and know, say, this is your job. Trust me, because you might put the pile here, pile of rubbish, someone come in with the dog, and they see clearly we're working coming down, the pile is there, and they come with the dog, they stops, slow down, and the dog is there weeing on the bags. You understand? And you're still, and you're just like this, and you still have to go and pick the bag up. So sometimes you say, oh God, why do you have to do this? Because as you go for the bag, everything come up in your face at the same time. And I say, no, this thing is not right.
I first started, my very first carnival, which would have been 1990, I was shocked. I was quite shocked at how much rubbish there was.
It's quite interesting because you're dealing with the aftermath and people are enjoying themselves. They're they're having a good time. There's a lot of rubbish to pick up. So you could be working from about 10, half 10, and you could be working all the way through to 5 o'clock in the morning.
Christmas, leading up to Christmas, it'll get busy just before Christmas, and then it'll die down. And then after Christmas, when we come back, that's when it was really busy. You've got like twice the amount of rubbish that you've got to collect because people was having parties, dinners and all that business. So there's definitely double the amount of rubbish that we had to take away.
Very nice day, man. Nice sunshine, you know? Yeah, man.
At Christmas, some of the crews got fantastic Christmas tips from the residents, say thank you for all the hard work that they've done throughout the year. So that was definitely a perk as well.
Leading up to Christmas, on my round, the customers were very good to us. We get loads of drinks, big tips.
Probably Knightsbridge and Chelsea, they're definitely the rounds to be on because they get appreciated more at Christmas, let's put it that way.
There used to be a few customers where, as I've gone into the street, they'd be waiting for me because I used to give them a big kiss and a hug at Christmas time. And they were very nice to us.
I'm sure I never actually saw it as a student because they weren't going to give it to me, the little kind of bits of money to take an extra bit of waste away that they shouldn't do. But our little nice little perk on a Friday was to go to this baker's shop in Gravesend, where we went out the back to get all their kind of waste and collected it. And once we'd put it in the back of the dust cart, the lady would be standing there with these lovely cream cakes on a Friday.
On my round, all the customers knew my name and they knew our crew as well. And when it was like summertime, when it's really hot, they come out and give us drinks, cakes and all that business. They were very, very happy with us.
1960s, it became a huge dispute in Kensington and Chelsea because Kensington and Chelsea Council tried to ban any of their dustmen having any tips like this. And the dustmen, literally going back to the early 19th century, it had always been part of it that you didn't get paid the top dollar wages, but there were the little extras that helped to bring up your wages. They had also something called totting, where they would take things down to shops like copper piping, copper wiring to sell extra, just to try and build their wages up. So that was an accepted perk, and when Kensington Church tried to crack down on it, it led to a big strike in 1970 that went on for a long time. So it's always been part of the culture.
If you were emptying a bin and you saw something that you might be able to sell on, or something you would want personally, that was called totting.
You'd have, say, pots and pans and all that, and then what we used to do, the old postman sacks, we used to find them and fill them up, like, say, one with aluminium, one with copper.
£42, 6 shillings. Right, okay.
Like books and that, we used to take to a bookshop. Lampshades you take to a light shop if you could find one. Clothes, and that went to the same place where we took the scrap metal.
Used to be a place in Fulham Road when I first started called Clarkey's. We used to call it Clarkey's. And you could take metal in there and things that you think were saleable, and they would sell it to him and he would give them money, and that would be it.
Money, people would chuck out a lot of money. Yeah. They go on holiday, and obviously, they wouldn't be bothered. They couldn't be bothered to go to the Bureau de Change, and they put it into a bag and they just.
But you had to be careful. If someone left a bicycle next to, or you found a bicycle next to a bin, that doesn't necessarily mean that the resident has thrown it out. And we've had quite a few occasions where we put them in the back of the lorry, like where the dustmen sit, and we've had a member of the public chasing us down the road because they thought we'd nicked their bike. But we said, well, it was against the bin. We thought it'd been left. And they said, no, I just propped it up there. So
Used to do trotting back in the day, but you was allowed to do that. Now you're not allowed to do that.
Old records. Used to have vinyl records. When the tape cassette come out, the vinyl records started coming in the bins. Then the tape cassette started coming when we got CDs. And now the CDs are getting thrown away because we're now streaming everything. So, yeah, you see the changes in society every day. Yeah, it's interesting. Never used to have as much takeaway. When I first started, the only takeaway was a CAF, and I think McDonald's was around. McDonald's started probably early 80s. So McDonald's was the main takeaway place. And then they started to build and grow, and so did the rubbish. The litter bins were, more litter bins had to be put out.
There is a lot more emphasis on Amazon like boxes, and a lot of people they get a lot home deliveries now. So yeah, that is a change to when I was a dustman.
Kensington is a very affluent borough, in parts anyway, and the residents are also very particular. They expect a certain level of service, so that can be challenging as well. So it's important that the guys were doing the job correctly. They weren't leaving spillage and mess behind, because otherwise we'd receive complaints, and there were a lot of complaints in those days.
They all know me by name now, the residents, and most of them are as good as gold. Like I said earlier, 99% of them are as good as gold. You'll get the odd one that will turn their nose up at you.
I think while you're doing the work, they've got quite a bit of respect in as far as you're emptying their bins. But when you meet people, when I used to meet people at social events like a party or whatever, and they said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a refuse collection driver." They tended to look down their nose a bit, which didn't worry me.
The people that are doing these jobs are doing jobs that we desperately need. Every society needs people to do these jobs, and people need a little bit more appreciation, because it's really hard work.
Well, COVID, great time. Great time. Streets were empty, no traffic jams.
Pandemic is only the sweepers on the street. No one else. It's only us. So what we do to break the routine, so each of us, he has to go straight away to his beat. Before we do work very fast, because he's busy, we have to empty the bin But during the pandemic, we was working very slow to kill the time. Otherwise, it's you finish your area and then nothing to do.
Because I thought we might be locked down as well, but somehow the rubbish has got to go. So we as key workers, and people are really happy to see us come and collect the rubbish. When I finish work and you go to the supermarkets, they can see I was in my work clothes, and they could see I was a key worker, and they would try and say, "Oh, you go to the front and go and get your food." But I said, "No, I'm just like you lot. I'm just waiting as anybody else." In the early days, we had one back, so everything went in the one back and just went down to the tip and went down the same hole. But now, with the new lorries, you've got twin backs, one for recycling, one for rubbish, and then you go up one side, you tip the rubbish, and you've got to go around the building and then tip the recycling.
There's been a lot of changes, but the changes don't necessarily equate down to the actual physical side of it. You're still picking the bags up by hand. You're still throwing them in the back of a vehicle. Not a lot of difference. Maybe there's probably more work to do now.
Now it's more bags, You do more bags than bins. Before, every house, it was a bin. Some houses probably have 10 bins. Well, like you see these houses, like there's like 10 flats in a house, so you'd have 10 bins. But now everyone's got bags, so it ain't too bad. No more bringing up bins from the basement.
I think the general conditions of the collectors changed when they brought wheelie bins in. Now that meant that we lost refuse collectors because there's no getting away from the fact that it takes less collectors to pick up bins that are on wheels.
The technology has made the job a lot easier, especially with the electric vehicles, smaller vehicles. You've got better uniforms, lighter equipment to collect the rubbish with. Like when we first started, you used to have big, thick, heavy metal bins, which I used to put ash in to cool it down, and you try and carry one of them up the stairs. Sometimes it used to take two of you. Once it went to plastic bins, you could flick it up on your shoulder and off you go yourself. Made it a lot easier.
I do wonder where it's going to go in the future. I mean, when your children or your grandchildren are doing this project, what's it going to be like then? You know, are we going to have robots running up and down basements? Or are we going to totally do away with refuse collection altogether? And we build all these new buildings and flats now. There's a place in France where they throw all their rubbish down the tip when it's burnt. That creates the heating and the energy for the building. Then it's pumped out into a container and taken away once in a blue moon. So there'll be no collection in the streets. But that's a long way away, I would imagine.